Today I'm going to talk to you about abstraction. Abstraction is something we do when we think, or read, or write, or communicate. It's done in language, and it's done in images. It's part of trying to understand things, both inside your own mind and as you communicate in the world with others. So I'm going to talk about levels of abstraction, sort of artificially dividing it into 3 levels. But one can be more or less abstract, and it's really on a continuum. So if we take one example, the most abstract notion in this example, life. Life is a very broad idea. It can mean lots of things. It's a huge topic. Life can mean any organism that grows or reacts to stimuli and reproduces, a tree, a fish. It can mean the period from life to death for any living thing. And it can mean all of the experiences that make up existence of a living thing. So it's very broad, and it can include many kinds of ideas. Now, if you get a little less abstract, you can divide what you're talking about in terms of life to, for instance, everyday life, all the actions performed daily, including mindless, habitual activities. Or you could be talking about life goals, what a person hopes to accomplish. Now, the least abstract or most specific would be a naming of those things in everyday life or those goals. So going to school on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a degree in bioengineering. And you can see that a degree in bioengineering, getting that degree and going to school on Monday, that's all part of life. But a degree in bioengineering is a life goal, and going to school is everyday life. But there could be many life goals, many other different ones, so this is more specific. I'm going to read to you the first paragraph of Virginia Woolf's essay, Life and the Novelist, and I want to show you how abstraction works in this beautiful first paragraph. The novelist, it is his distinction and danger, is terribly exposed to life. Other artists, partially at least, withdraw. They shut themselves up for weeks alone with a dish of apples and a paint box, or a roll of music paper and a piano. When they emerge, it is to forget and distract themselves. But the novelist never forgets and is seldom distracted. He fills his glass and lights his cigarette. He enjoys presumably all the pleasures of talk and table, but always with a sense that he is being stimulated and played upon by the subject matter of his art. Taste, sound, movement, a few words here, a gesture there, a man coming in, a woman going out, even the motor that passes in the street or the beggar who shuffles along the pavement, and all the reds and blues and lights and shades of the scene claim his attention and rouse his curiosity. He can no more cease to receive impressions than a fish in mid-ocean can cease to let the water rush through his gills. Some of the ideas in this paragraph are very abstract indeed, and you can think about them as if they were big buckets that could contain many things. So, for instance, danger. Danger can be a lot of things. It can be 2 specific different things, such as people or animals or even inanimate objects like cars. There's a danger that my car will break down, for instance. Exposure can be exposure to the elements, or it could be self-exposure through talk, or even physically exposing yourself, taking off all your clothes. It's a big bucket. We've already talked about life, the kinds of things that life can include. Withdrawal. It could be a team's withdrawal from a competition. It could be the water withdrawing as the tide goes out. It could be withdrawal from school. Or it could be self-isolation for someone who is sick or depressed. And pleasure is as broad an idea as there are kinds of things that people get pleasure in. So that's quite a lot. It could be pleasure of body, pleasure of mind, pleasure of a parent, pleasure of a child, pleasure of an artist, pleasure of a builder, lots of different kinds of things, a huge bucket that pleasure refers to. Art can be paintings, literature, sculpture, architecture, collage. It includes many things, and critics argue over the boundaries of the term all the time, and they end up applying qualifiers to make it a bit more specific. So they might call a beautiful piñata or a spray-painted street mural, they might call that folk art, for instance. Adding the word folk makes the bucket a little smaller. Impression can refer to sense impressions or first impressions, or to the impression of something on a piece of paper, like a print or an art piece, a poster. A little bit less abstract are the words highlighted now in this paragraph: the novelist, other artists, the pleasures of talk and table, the subject matter of his art, taste, sound, movement, man, woman, reds, blues, lights, shades, the scene. Let's go over these in more detail. So the novelist is still pretty broad because there are lots of people who write novels, and there are people of all different kinds, and there are novels of all different kinds. Other artists is even bigger because there are a lot of artists who are not novelists. Taste, sound, and movement, those are things of the senses, right? It's a sensory experience. And reds, blues, lights, shades, the scene, that's all visual. Those are all visual terms, and very broad. Red can be anything from a red balloon to a red car. Let's look a little more closely, though, at man and woman. The word man is often used as a very large abstraction. So, for instance, Rousseau opens his essay, The Social Contract, with the most amazing first sentence: "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." Now, I kind of doubt that Rousseau was actually thinking of women, too. He was kind of talking to men, but theoretically, at least, the term man includes all people when it's that abstract. Woman is a little bit less abstract because it doesn't include all people. "Frailty, thy name is woman," is a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, meaning all women are frail, which is not true. But at any rate, they can be very abstract. Yet in this paragraph, we have a man and a woman. So that's a little bit more specific. It's less abstract than the man in chains or the woman who's frail. And this is also a man coming in. So it's a man walking into a building or through a door, a woman going out. Much less abstract. The pleasures of talk and table are also more specific than pleasure. It's when you're talking with friends or having dinner or breakfast and talking with people. His art. So that also is more specific. It's the art of the novelist, not just any art. And the subject matter of art. The subject matter of art is more specific than art. It's what art is about. So these terms are abstract, but a little bit less abstract than the first level. On the third level, we have things that are pretty specific. A dish of apples, a paint box, a roll of music paper, a piano, his glass, his cigarette. So I want to show you what Virginia Woolf is doing in this paragraph. She's moving among the different levels of abstraction, and in doing so, she lets you know what she means by each particular abstraction. It's what we call defining our terms, but it doesn't involve looking things up in a dictionary. It involves talking about what you mean. So other artists withdraw very abstract, and we don't know what they're withdrawing from or why. They shut themselves up for weeks alone with paint and a piano. So now we know what she means. To create their art, they go off by themselves. all the pleasures of talk and table. We don't know what pleasures she's specifically referring to. He fills his glass and lights his cigarette. He's sitting at a table enjoying wine, perhaps, and a cigarette. And when she says impressions, of course, that's very abstract, but it's preceded by taste, sound, movement. So we know that she means sensory impressions. And she gives us detailed examples of sound, words being said, motors, the sound of a motor in the street, a shuffling sound, and movements, a gesture, a man coming in, a woman going out, the motor passing, the beggar shuffling. So she gives us very specific, detailed examples of what she means by these abstract terms. And notice how lovely the paragraph is. So here's an abstract idea, the subject matter of the novelist's art. And here's an abstract idea, impressions. And here, in between, are details that are defining what she means by both. The subject matter of his art are impressions like these. So she's moving up and down levels of abstraction. You can see here that subject matter of his art and sound, and subject matter of his art and movement are both defined by these details. So, as I said, Virginia Woolf moves up and down the levels of abstraction in order to signify what she's talking about. And it's important to do even when you're thinking. For instance, you say to yourself, life is no good. Well, what specifically about life is no good and what's good? We want to get more detailed. When professors ask you to be more specific in your papers, they mean add a little detail or a scenario about what you're trying to say, what you're talking about when you use those big terms. If you were to start a paper with this sentence, life is hard, your reader would wonder, well, what specifically are you referring to? The life of a steelworker is quite difficult, at least at work. But they might even think of counterexamples. Well, the life of a well-pampered cat is not hard. Doesn't look like it. So you need to be more specific as soon as you can, maybe not in that sentence, but in the following sentence. Or if you do mean that all of life is hard, then immediately think of the counterexamples. Life, even the life of the most well-pampered cat, is quite difficult. That would be a great opening sentence. We need these big terms. We need them to think at higher levels, but we also need to know what we mean by them. It's true also that images can be detailed or abstract. Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics goes into great detail about this, and he wants you to notice that the word eye is really abstract. It looks nothing like an eye. It bears no resemblance. It's a very abstract way of referring to this thing that you see. Words are abstract, but pictures can also be more or less abstract. So here is a photograph. And notice McCloud says reality is this way. There's a photograph. Let's say it's a photograph of Harold. Here's a drawing of that photograph, and you could say it's a drawing of a man that looks like Harold. Here's a less detailed, more abstract version of that drawing. And now you'd say, well, this looks like a man in his 30s who's kind of good looking. And then this is even more or less detailed, and you'd say, well, that's a man. And the least detailed of all, this face, could be the face of anybody, a man, a woman, a child. It could be even a car, if a car looks a certain way. So as we get more and more abstract, more and more things can be represented by that abstraction. And in order to use abstractions and understand what we're meaning when we use them, we have to dip down into the specific every once in a while, just to give a specific instance of what we mean by what we're talking or thinking about. This learning module has been about abstraction. Abstraction is something we do when we think, when we read, when we write, when we draw, and even when we look at the world.